Hi, welcome to A Gray Barn Rising. I'm here this evening with Bootsy Beagle, and I'm reading the poems of the Chilean poet Gabriela Mistral. She lived from 1889 to 1957, and she was in fact the first Latin American poet to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, which she was awarded in 1945. Her work is highly regarded, but I don't think it is as well known in this country as it should be, even though she spent many years in the United States. Her early work in particular is highly regarded in her home country and throughout the world, but many poets agree, as I do, that it's really the later books that are the most intense books for her two final books. And I want to read mostly from those two final books this evening. She's a poet who really writes about her experiences of loss, and yet those experiences of loss are rarely cast in personal terms. So she's a poet of great collectivity in which she can use her consciousness to look at her individual grief and suffering and loss and transform that into great empathy for the world and for other people. In fact, some of her early poems were often referred to as the mother poems. She wrote through the voice of a mother, and she never actually had the experience of motherhood. But those poems began to arise because she overheard some really cutting remarks by some men one day when a pregnant woman walked by, and she felt this great empathy and was able to write the mother poems. So that just gives you some insight into the kinds of things. I mentioned loss for her. The other thing, she had a romantic interest, and I think it was around 1906, something like that, and he committed suicide, and she had a nephew many years later who she felt was like a son to her, and he also took his life. And those experiences had a great impact on her and on her poetry. So I'm going to be reading from the Doris Dana translation of the selected poems of Gabriela Mistral, book I've had for a number of years. I discovered her work, I'd say 1980, 1981, something like that. So she's been a poet who has been very important to me for a number of years. Eight puppies. Between the 13th and the 15th day, the puppies opened their eyes. Suddenly they saw the world, anxious with terror and joy. They saw the belly of their mother, saw the door of their house, saw a deluge of light, saw flowering azaleas. They saw more. They saw all, the red, the black, the ash, scrambling up, pawing and clawing, more lively than squirrels. They saw the eyes of their mother, heard my rasping cry and my laugh. And I wish I were born with them. Could it not be so another time? To leap from a clump of banana plants, one morning of wonders, a dog, a coyote, a deer, to gaze with wide pupils, to run, to stop, to run, to fall, to whimper and whine and jump with joy, riddled with sun and with barking, a hallowed child of God, his secret divine servant. That poem just gains a incredible velocity to it as it moves through. This is a poem that she wrote after her nephew's suicide. It's called One Word. You'll hear it has a much darker tone to it, and much more. It's a later poem, much more intense tone. I have in my throat one word that I cannot speak, will not free, though its thrust of blood pounds me. If I voiced it, I would scorch the living grass, bleed the lamb, fell the bird. I have to cut it from my tongue, find a beaver's hole, or bury it beneath lime and more quicklime, lest, soul-like, it break free. I wish to give no sign of what I live, as this word courses through my blood, ebbs and flows, rises, falls with each mad breath. Though Job, my father, burning, spoke it, I will not give it utterance, lest it roll vagrant and be found by river women, twist itself in their braids, or mangle and blaze the poor thicket. I wish to throw seeds so violent they burst and smother it in one night, leaving not even a syllable's trace, or rip it from myself with the serpent's severing tooth, and return to my house, enter and sleep, torn from it, sliced from it, wake after 2,000 days, newly born out of sleep and oblivion. Never again to remember the word between my lips, that word of iodine and alum stone, or ever again that one night, the ambush in a foreign land, the lightning bolt at the door, and my flesh abroad with no soul. Excuse me. Boy, that's a very intense poem. There are some parallels rhythmically and even imagistically with another Chilean poet with whom I imagine most viewers are familiar, and that's Pablo Neruda. Gabriela Mistral was actually a principal at a grammar school that Pablo Neruda attended, and he came to her, he was age 15 or 16, something like that, he came to her with some of his early poems. So there's that interesting lineage there as well. Mourning, and this is the grieving kind of mourning. Mourning. And one single night there burst from my breast the tree of mourning. It heightened and grew, pushed my bones, split my flesh, till its crown reached my head. It spread great leaves and branches over my shoulder, over my back, and in 3 days I was covered, rich with it, as with my blood. Where can they touch me now? What arm shall I give that is not of mourning? Like billows of smoke, I am no longer flame or ember. I am this spiral, this liana, this wheeling of dense smoke. Those who come to see me still call me by name, see my face, but I, who smother, see myself a devoured and smoking tree, pitch of night, consumed carbon, thick juniper, a diluting cypress, real to the eye, fled from the hand. In one pure night, my mourning shaped in the labyrinth of my body, and this night breath enveloped me. This smoke they call mourning, that engulfs and blinds me. My final tree is not of the earth, not of seed, not of wood, not planted, not watered. I myself am my own cypress, my obscure shade, my circumference, my own unsown cerement, and my dream that walks a smoking tree with opened eyes. In the space of one night, my sun fell, my day vanished, my body became a cloud of smoke that a child can cut with his hand. The colors left my clothes, the white, the blue fled, and in the morning I found myself a pine tree of burnt embers. They see a smoldering pine that walks. They hear me speak behind my smoke, and they will grow weary of loving me, of eating and living beneath this dark triangle, fallacious and crucified, that bears no more resin, has no roots, no new growth. One single color through all the seasons. One single flank of smoke, and never a cluster of pine cones to make fire, supper, and joy. So that's a small taste of some of the work of the Chilean poet Gabriela Mistral. She, as I hope you heard in that selection, she has great power and compassion and certainly great empathy for the world around her. I hope you seek out her work. I read from, again, the translation by Doris Dana. Thank you so much for joining Bootsy and me for another episode of A Great Barn.